There's something most people don't want to admit about spiritual warfare. Something that happens behind closed doors when nobody's watching. You've probably felt it yourself. That sudden overwhelming temptation that seems to come out of nowhere, hitting you hardest when you're trying to walk closest to your divine purpose. It's not random. It's not just human nature. And it's definitely not a sign that you're weak or unworthy. The truth is, those who carry the deepest calling often face the fiercest battles with lust. And there's a reason for that. A pattern that's been playing out for thousands of years. From the mightiest kings to the most anointed prophets, this struggle has brought down giants of faith who seemed unstoppable in every other area of their lives. Right now, you might be thinking this is just another video about temptation, but what I'm about to reveal goes deeper than surface-level advice. We're talking about spiritual mechanics here, the hidden warfare that targets those who threaten darkness the most. Because here's what the enemy knows that most believers don't. If he can trap you in cycles of lust, he can neutralize your spiritual authority before you even realize what's happening. Think about it this way. When a military wants to take down a high-value target, they don't attack their strongest points. They look for weaknesses, blind spots, areas where defenses are down. The spiritual realm operates the same way. The enemy studies your patterns, your triggers, your moments of vulnerability. And lust becomes, it's private, and it creates his weapon of choice because it's effective shame that keeps people isolated and silent. But why does this particular trap seem to ensnare those with the greatest calling? Why do we see pattern after pattern of spiritually gifted individuals falling into this same snare? The answers are more complex than most realize, and they reveal something profound about the nature of spiritual warfare itself. The first hidden trap is something I call spiritual sensitivity overload. When you're chosen for a divine purpose, your spiritual senses become heightened. You feel things more deeply, perceive spiritual realities others miss, and carry burdens that would crush ordinary people. But here's what nobody tells you about this gift. It works both ways. The same sensitivity that allows you to hear God's voice clearly also makes you more susceptible to the enemy's whispers. Your heightened spiritual awareness doesn't just pick up divine frequencies. It also makes you acutely aware of temptation, amplifying desires that others might easily dismiss. What feels like a small temptation to someone else can feel overwhelming to someone with heightened spiritual sensitivity. It's like having spiritual nerve endings that are constantly exposed, making every attack feel more intense than it actually is. The second trap is the isolation factor, and this one catches people off guard every time. When you're walking a divine path, you often find yourself set apart from others. Your conversations go deeper, your concerns are different, your priorities don't align with the crowd. This separation is necessary for your calling, but it creates a dangerous vulnerability. Without strong spiritual connections and accountability, lust becomes a private battle fought in the shadows. The very isolation that protects your calling can become the breeding ground for secret struggles. When you're carrying heavy spiritual responsibilities, but have no one who truly understands your journey, temptation offers a counterfeit form of connection and release. The third hidden trap involves what happens when divine calling meets human woundedness. Many chosen ones carry deep emotional scars from their past: rejection, abandonment, betrayal, trauma that hasn't fully healed. These wounds create entry points that the enemy exploits with surgical precision. Lust becomes the enemy's twisted solution to emotional pain, offering false intimacy where real connection should exist. When your heart is broken, when you feel misunderstood or rejected, sexual temptation presents itself as comfort. It promises to fill the void, to make you feel wanted and alive again. But it's a counterfeit that only deepens the original wound, creating cycles of shame that keep you trapped between your calling and your pain. The fourth trap is perhaps the most insidious because it disguises itself as strength. I call it the anointing paradox. The the more spiritually gifted you become, the more the enemy targets your flesh. It's like having a high-performance sports car with worn-out brakes. Your spiritual engine is powerful, capable of incredible things, but your human limitations haven't magically disappeared. Many chosen ones make the mistake of thinking their spiritual gifts automatically strengthen their flesh. They assume that because they can prophesy, heal the sick, or move in supernatural power, they're somehow immune to basic human temptation. This false confidence becomes their downfall. They neglect the daily disciplines of prayer, fasting, and renewing their mind because they believe their anointing will carry them through. But here's the brutal reality. The flesh remains weak regardless of how strong your spirit becomes. In fact, the contrast becomes more pronounced. The higher you soar spiritually, the more devastating it feels when your flesh pulls you down. This creates an internal war zone where your spirit is willing, but your flesh is desperately weak, and lust becomes the battlefield where this conflict plays out most intensely. The fifth and final trap is what I call the pressure cooker effect. Chosen ones often carry responsibilities that would break ordinary people. They're interceding for nations, bearing spiritual burdens for their communities, standing in gap for others who can't stand for themselves. This constant spiritual pressure creates an internal tension that demands release. When healthy outlets aren't available, when you can't share the full weight of what you're carrying, lust offers itself as a pressure valve. It promises momentary escape from the intensity of your calling. The enemy whispers that you deserve this release, that you've earned the right to indulge after carrying so much for so long. But what feels like relief becomes another burden. What promises escape becomes another chain. The temporary pleasure of lust adds guilt and shame to an already heavy load, creating a vicious cycle where the very thing that promised relief becomes another source of spiritual pressure. These 5 traps work together, creating a web that can ensnare even the most committed believers. The enemy doesn't need to use an opening that leads to spiritual all 5 at once. Sometimes just one is enough to create compromise. Understanding these patterns is the first step to war apps that have been specifically to enough. The real question, freedom, but recognition alone isn't becomes, how do you break free from TR designed to target your unique calling and vulnerabilities? So here's what you need to understand about these 5 hidden traps. They're not working against you by accident. This is strategic warfare designed to neutralize your spiritual effectiveness before you even realize you're under attack. The enemy isn't playing games. He's studied your patterns, mapped your vulnerabilities, and crafted specific strategies to keep you trapped in cycles that drain your spiritual authority. But recognition is power. Now that you see these traps for what they are, you can begin dismantling them. The spiritual sensitivity that makes you vulnerable to intense temptation is the same sensitivity that allows you to discern God's voice above the noise. The isolation that creates dangerous blind spots is also what sets you apart for divine purpose. The wounds that create entry points for lust are also the experiences that give you compassion for others who are broken. Every trap the enemy sets contains the seeds of your greatest spiritual strength. The question isn't whether you'll face these battles, because if you're truly called, you will. The question is whether you'll fight them in secret, slowly losing ground, or whether you'll bring them into the light where healing and victory become possible. Your calling is too important to let these traps derail your destiny. The world needs what you carry, and the enemy knows it. That's exactly why he's fighting so hard to keep you bound. But his desperation reveals something powerful. You're a threat to darkness, and that means you have everything you need to walk in complete freedom.